Quick Trip is to the Midwest what Mecca is to Islam.
How much did you listen to of our little sample thing?
I listened to the whole thing. You sent me a 15-minute piece, and I listened to it, and I really liked it, except I hate the sound of my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
So any of these things that we record, I will probably never listen to, ever. I might listen to a couple of the first ones just to make sure it sounds all right, but other than that, I don't really like the sound of my own voice, which I'm wondering, because I've kind of heard this before. Do you think that's like some sort of weird psychological thing? Because I feel like everybody hates the sound of their own voice.
Yeah, I mean, there's that whole, like, your voice sounds different to you. Like, it's kind of like the, what's the thing with the mirror? Like, the way you look in the mirror is inverse. And so when you look at a picture of yourself, you're looking at inverse of what you normally think. And so it looks wrong. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea how like real any of this is, but they say the same thing about listening to your voice, is that you're used to hearing your voice through your own head. And so when you hear it from the outside, it sounds like different than normal. And you like have a hard time processing it. I think you're just self-conscious about yourself.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It's like I'm self-conscious about looking at something I like drew and showed somebody too.
Yeah, that's true, but it's different. Like, to give you an example, there was one year where I was looking for a movie podcast that I wanted to listen to, and I found and I looked online to find like what are some good movie podcasts where they review stuff, and I found this podcast, and I won't mention it because they do fine, and I'm about to badmouth them, but I listened to the first couple episodes of the podcast, and it was weird because I really liked it, but for some reason I couldn't keep listening to it, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And after I quit listening to it, about a week later, I realized what it was that one of the people on the podcast had almost an identical voice to mine, and I just found myself hating that person every time he talked.
That's interesting. I don't know of anybody who has a voice that, at least from my perception, sounds similar to mine.
I don't either, but this was just like a once in a lifetime opportunity that I just happened to stumble across this podcast.
Your audio doppelganger.
It really was. That's what it was. I couldn't stand. I would be listening to it and thinking every time the person talked, be like, this guy again. Talking about movies, and because I didn't have a real good reason. Like, all the stuff that he said was smart. It was entertaining. It was a funny podcast, but I just couldn't keep listening to it because that guy talked like 50% of the time, and he sounded exactly like me. And I just heard myself too much in it and had to stop listening to it. So
that's weird. See,
it is an interesting
so what I found,
phenomenon.
And maybe this is because I was spending so much time like editing and trying to process my voice, was I got used to my voice faster than I expected. Mm-hmm. But what I was saying was what I didn't like. I was like, man, like none of the things that I was thinking, I feel like I accurately expressed at all. And I had like a hard time properly forming a sentence, and I don't know, it was weird.
I do think that's just self-analysis, though, because whenever I listen to it, whenever I listened to what you were saying, I was like, oh, everything sounds professional. It sounds like I thought you were communicating everything you were saying in our test episode clearly. And I was just overanalyzing. I hate my voice. I preface things way too many times, and then forget the original point, have too many tangents. I'm scatterbrained. And I was just thinking, like, I don't know if you got this too. I felt like I was acting.
Whenever, a little bit. Although I don't necessarily right now.
Yeah, that's true. And I did feel like my voice was high. I was speaking higher than I normally would, which I had mentioned the other night too. And I even feel like I'm doing that now, and I keep like self-consciously lowering my voice.
It doesn't sound like to me. I feel like I'm talking too deep, but I don't know if it's because I have headphones on and it makes my voice sound really deep in my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering if I'm wondering if like musicians have that problem, or the fact that they're musicians is because they can overcome that problem easily.
I think
wonder
that's
if
part of
we're
any
just
public thing. I like that's why whenever you do public speaking, I think it's really popular to record yourself because when you listen to yourself, you constantly hear all of your tics, like all of your
yeah.
likes and all of your nervous, tapping and all of that stuff. And so the more conscious you are of it, the more you start working on it, and then eventually you just stop doing it. Apparently, I wouldn't know because I don't do public speaking, but yeah, that's the thing.
I had to for a little while whenever I was helping out with that what was that trailer church thing
Yeah.
years ago, and so I had to like prepare stuff, and you just kind of do it, and I kind of learned through that process that you do self-analyze, and I hated every single thing that I did and said. But people would always say, oh no, that was actually really good, and you always wonder, like, are they just being nice people, or was actually what you said okay?
Right.
And eventually, I just got to the point where you just say to yourself, well, you have to do this regardless. There's no way you can back out of it. As scared as I was to actually say anything. And you just have to do it regardless. So that's the only way I ever got through that. It never was comfortable for 2 years. So
Yeah, I did a couple different like speaking sessions at a conference, like developer conference, and that was kind of the same thing. It was like whenever I was initially signing up, I was like, I know I'll be nervous beforehand, but right now I'm not. So once you signed up, it was like now there's a ticking clock, and you're just gonna have to do it. And then it was like, fine, you didn't really have a choice.
Right.
They just sent out things for this year, and I'm going through that same process of like, do I sign up for that? Because once I do, I'm going to spend an enormous amount of time looking for, funny pictures to put in a slideshow that I'll eventually delete because I think they're lame.
I'm sitting here on Rotten Tomatoes, and I won't say anything plot-wise because I don't want to know either about Spider-Man Homecoming, which is coming out next week, I think.
Sometime soon. They got the full marketing blitz going.
It has really good reviews, at least on Rotten Tomatoes.
I actually haven't even seen a percentage.
Okay, I won't tell you the percent. I'll just say they're good, and there's about 73 reviews in so far, so there's a good chunk that'll go up to about 250 by the time it's all said and done, so that'll move around.
Yeah.
It's enough to have a consensus, at least in the preliminary stage of reviewing. And it's weird. I love Spider-Man. I loved the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, even the third one that had mixed reception. I even was okay with the not as great 2 sequels that when they did the reboot. But for some reason, I just can't get into whatever's going on here with this new one. I'm just not feeling the hype like everybody else seems to be. So I know I'm an outlier because I've talked to enough people to realize that if for some reason I'm the only one that's not hyped about it. I know you're excited because we've kind of talked about this before.
Yeah, I feel like you're not really that much of an outlier there. Almost everybody I talk to is kind of Spider-Man fatigued.
Huh. It's just weird looking through these reviews. Like, it's, for instance, this one. It's not only the best Spider-Man movie, it's one of the best films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You know what? I have seen, like, one of the sites that I go to. I just happened to see that title. It may have been the same one, but it was a very similar sounding thing. And I was like, really?
This is Mark Daniel from Toronto Sun. Just wanted to give the credit there. Part of me hopes that whenever we go to see the movie, eventually, that it will just blow my mind and it'll be this amazing movie. But for some reason, I just can't get into it. Part of me, oddly, it has nothing really to do with the fatigue thing, as you mentioned. Really, for me, it's more of it being too much part of the Marvel universe, which is weird because the younger person in me likes the idea of combined universes, and I'm really looking forward to the Infinity War Avengers movie that they've been setting up for 10 years. And so I have this really weird cognitive dissonance with this movie coming out because I'm excited about the prospects of all the Marvel strands coming together. But with the Spider-Man movie, they really promoted Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man in the trailers and everything, and that part of it, in a weird way, I find myself being bugged by it more than happy.
I'm totally in the same boat. I think it's because I love Spider-Man, but Marvel movies are just kind of like, yeah, I'll go see it. And almost every single one, the end result is, oh, that was better than I expected. Like, I didn't really care that much about Doctor Strange, but then I really liked it once I saw it.
It's a good point.
I don't know, that's kind of how all of them are. But Spider-Man's weird because it's like the side of me that likes Spider-Man is really excited, but the side of me that feels that way about the Marvel movies is kind of like, it'll be fine. But then I will probably really like it. Like, he was my favorite part of the Civil War. Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I like I said, I do hope I get into the movie and it just blown away by it. But I think part of it as well is just like, to me, I feel like at least in the comic book Marvel universe, Spider-Man is like Superman, not necessarily in his powers, because obviously they're very different types of characters. But whereas in like DC Universe, Superman typically is supposed to be like the lighthearted, colorful, like heart of the DC Universe. That's kind of what I've always felt like Spider-Man is supposed to be in the Marvel Universe. Whereas them putting him into this cinematic universe, it feels more like, oh, we got Spider-Man now, so we're going to put him into this larger-than-life mythology that we've already established that's kind of separately. It feels like he's kind of tacked on, if that makes sense. Even though I'm sure they're putting a lot into it now that they have the character.
I do hope. I think so. Again, I know literally nothing. I haven't seen any of the trailers or anything. But what I'm really hoping happens is that it's very contained in New York. Because I don't think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any of the Marvel movies yet have stayed in New York. I mean, I'm sure. Obviously, like the Avengers took place there, but that was a big, worldwide event kind of thing.
Well, if you count the Marvel Netflix shows, which they're kind of their own animal.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so because on a technical level they are part of that universe, but that's definitely a very different feel, and none of those are the movies. So I take your point. I get what you're saying.
But honestly, I really like that about those. What was it? Daredevil, it's like Hell's Kitchen is what it's all about.
Right. Yeah, and I do like that. I just want it to feel more personal. I'm hoping that the promotional stuff with Robert Downey Jr. and everything was more just for the sake of saying, hey, look, we got Robert Downey Jr. in here too. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I'm hoping that was more of a marketing thing, and I just want it to be more of a smaller, contained, we're not saving the world type thing, but more like city type.
Agreed. While we're on this subject, can we talk about the posters for this movie? Have you seen them?
I've seen a couple. Like, I've seen the one where he's like got the headphones on and he's got like a jacket.
So that one's cool. I'm talking, and actually, I'm probably going to bring this up and then change my mind later because they might be fake, but people keep posting them and they're all like really cringeworthy.
I'm going to pull them up here.
I just Googled it. It looks terrible. But it doesn't look as bad as I remember. But doesn't it just look like it's just a bunch of garbage photoshopped onto a barely visible city of New York? With, it's like, and we have to really like sneak in there that the Washington Monument is somehow involved. So there's just like an awkward Washington Monument that's not quite aligned. The ground plane isn't quite aligned with the New York skyline. Do you see that?
Yeah.
It's like a bad Photoshop job.
If you search Spider-Man Homecoming poster parodies and then look in the image tab of Google, it's amazing.
This is riveting podcasting material. Oh my gosh. No, okay. I mean, that's exactly it, right? You see the Sonic one?
Yeah, They're just like so loaded.
The thing is,
One's got the Leonardo DiCaprio meme from Wolf on Wall Street.
do we need to make an official A-Town poster with the Arnold Water Tower in various Photoshop poses, and then
We should.
all of
And
our
we
friends just like awkward. Heck. Oh, this isn't the real one. I was like, Iron Man's face is in here 4 times.
One is Tobey Maguire from Spider-Man 3.
Ooh.
These
My
are great.
goodness.
We should definitely link a couple of these in the show notes.
Oh yeah, we get to do show
So
notes.
for our listeners, we will link some of these in the show notes, or at least we might link the Google image search.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one that noticed this.
I agree with you though. Those.
Oh yeah, did you? Okay, here's the other one. This is the one I was thinking of.
This one with the Michael Jordan heads,
Yeah.
or O.J. Simpson, whoever that is.
All right,
It's hard to tell.
I just texted you the IMAX official IMAX one. This is
All right.
real. Did you see that? This is not fake.
Lord.
Yeah. It's like they wanted, it's like it's a high school theme, so we're going to hire high schoolers to do our posters.
It looks like, I'll tell you exactly what it looks like. What this looks like to me is like a poster background, and it's like one of those cheap looking sticker books that you can buy at the dollar store in promotion for the movie.
Yeah.
And a
What?
5-year-old just randomly
That's the thing, right? What
plays
high
stickers all
schooler
over it.
has like 5-year-old stickers all over their brown paper bag or whatever the heck this is supposed to be on? So one thing I've noticed, I don't know if I've talked to you about this at all, but I've had a lot of conversations with people lately. Both of us, I think, are really into following like the news generally, but especially politics lately have just been very interesting.
Yeah.
I won't get into too specifics, at least not yet. But I just like talking to everyone to get their different opinions because I like understanding different viewpoints, especially if I think you have a different viewpoint than me. I will like poke you and prod you to try and get your angle on something because a lot of times I just don't understand your view, and once I do, I don't know. I like to be swayed by people, but as I've been talking to people on one specific side, at least lately, but even both, I've ran into this weird thing where the conversation instantly gets shut down because you just can't trust anything anymore. Like nothing's true, so
Yeah.
what's even the point? And whenever you try to like, well, there's obviously like a bunch of crazy information going around, but there's still some reputable journalists out there and everything. It's kind of like, well, nobody has the time to figure that out anymore, so I'm just not even going to look at it anymore. And I don't know how to deal with that. And it's been frustrating me lately because I think you're probably similar to me, but I'm the type of person that if a story comes out, I really enjoy thinking through like, ooh, what do I think about this? What's the morality of this or what's the economics of this or whatever. And so usually I have a gut reaction, right? Whether it's on the more left-leaning, right-leaning, or whatever. And then the first thing I'll do is go to the most reputable site I know that's on like the opposite side and see what
Yeah.
they have to say. Because a lot of times they instantly change my viewpoint. And then I'll go, to the other side and find that. But I get why most people don't want to do that. I do it for entertainment. But I feel like
Yeah.
I can't recommend that to most people because they just don't want to. So it's like, I just don't know what to do.
Well, let me put it this way. So there's a local radio show that I listen to, and I know you listened to it in the past. I don't really think you do anymore. And they always mention on there, which you may have heard him say before, that like he thinks that there's probably like 10% of people on each end of the extremes, politically speaking. And just to take politics for an example, and 80% of us are in the middle somewhere. And I initially kind of used to agree with that statement, but I've kind of wondered more recently, especially with the election that we had back in 2016, and then its lingering effects with how news is handled and how people react to news and certain stations, has kind of come into this year as well, into the presidency. And I kind of feel like it's the opposite. I feel like there's maybe, if we're lucky, 20% of the people that are in the middle and I have no statistics on this, so this is a complete gut thing. But I feel like 20% of us are somewhere in the middle, and the majority of people, it's easier to just get your news based off of your echo chamber. And I think that's further compounded by the fact that everything is politics now, which is why I kind of use politics as an example. And that's kind of an obvious statement. It's like, duh. But it really is problematic. So, like, for instance, take an issue like climate change. Climate change is something that is either true or not, independent on your political affiliation. But obviously, it's been tied more to the left-leaning side of politics.
Right. Thanks, Al Gore.
Yeah, exactly. Now, to be fair, there actually have been some popularizers of certain scientific ideas that aren't themselves scientists, such as Al Gore. And I know there were some like flaws or whatever in his documentary Inconvenient Truth. And so that doesn't necessarily help. But
well, and I really think, I don't have the data to back this up, so I'm probably wrong. But it really feels like that was this seminal moment where climate change specifically became polarized politically. Like it was because even Reagan was kind of big on environmental protection stuff. And Bush was too. Nixon created the EPA.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I don't even remember it being a thing during the Clinton administration. I'm sure it was. But it seems like Al Gore making that this like primary issue meant that the other side had to swing hard against it. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, now this is a political issue. So now nobody can agree on it.
It almost makes you wonder if Al Gore doing that had a more net damage to the perception of climate change.
I mean, that's what a lot of people think. Like I said, we should caveat this with, I'm sure there's actually lots of studies on this, and I'm sure what we're saying is completely...
Oh, absolutely. But kind of what we're doing here, and the goal is to just kind of be a stream of consciousness of just two people having a conversation. So, yeah, I mean, if anybody ever listens to this and feels like we're wrong somewhere or something, feel free to send us stuff, and we'll consider it and may even approach it again in the future. But yeah, so yeah, I do wonder though, what do you think about though that idea that most people are in the middle? And I don't mean to prop us up as if we're the wise people that are in the middle, because there's certainly things that I have my biases on and I don't really think much through, and I have my own versions of an echo chamber as well. So I don't mean to make it sound like I'm the smart one or anything, but I do feel like there's a lot of people that are just unaware, and it's a big majority, and they're
unaware of what the other side even thinks.
Yeah.
That's my thing, because it's like, I don't mind if you have a strong side that you take, but if your only understanding of the other side is the straw man constructed by your side, right, then you're always going to be able to say like, oh, well, those guys are idiots because they think X. But the reason you think that X is what they think is the fact that that's what, your version of the media has told you all the time. And it's not hard. I mean, I don't know. It's really not hard to find other opposing viewpoints. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But to say that most people are in the middle, I think on certain issues, most people are on an extreme, but for that issue.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So, like, you could be, if you were to, like, plot me on a graph, I might be, dead center between left and right. Mm-hmm. But if you picked one issue, I'd probably take a hard stance on that issue on one side or the other. Now, I like to think that I'm, easily convinced if you show me a good argument for one way that I could move that. Mm-hmm. But there aren't many issues where I'm like, oh yeah, I have like a purely middle stance, because I don't even know what that necessarily means.
Well, I think like for all of the good things that social media, 24-hour news cycle, etc. has given us, it also obviously comes with, I think it just tends to make people more entrenched, and people, particularly online, even people that I like following, it seems like everything is geared around saving face. So that kind of turns people off from even wanting to understand the other group, because it's all about these snapshots of, particularly on Twitter, how can you make the other person look like a devastated idiot in the space of 140 characters or however many they have
like
now.
it's like the debate thing. Like,
yeah,
instead of two people talking about what they think, you have two people trying to win.
yeah. And then on top of that, I don't know who originally started this phrase, but I actually got it from Sam Harris off his podcast, and he uses the term steel manning, and that's in direct contrast to the straw manning phrase, which is a logical fallacy where you set up a straw man and defeat it. And he says, like, we need more steel manning just as an operative technique when we have conversations, but no one really wants to do that.
And what do you mean by that?
So, like, for instance, when you are talking to someone and you're taking an issue with something that they've said, you try to prop up their position as best as possible.
Okay. Yeah.
The goal is to not try to cut down as an operative way of debate, but it's the same as like with enforcement. Positive reinforcement works better than negative reinforcement traditionally, is my understanding from what I learned in classes about where they talked about that sort of thing. And it's the same thing, just sort of applied to debate. Like, people tend to react better and even give ground whenever you come at them with a more positive slant. And it's become sort of toxic, I think, on both sides, because you have a lot of name calling going on. And then you have, in addition to that, you have a lot of people that are so into their particular viewpoint and they put it on such a pedestal that you can't, if someone disagrees, then they don't deserve a platform.
Right.
And now there certainly are people that don't deserve platforms, but that's the problem, is we've taken this culture of no platforming and having these social issues be so devastating and important in our own echo chambers or on our own sides that to even question an ounce of them, well, they're obviously a bad person that doesn't deserve dignity.
Right.
And it's a weird line to tread, because there are certain situations, for instance, where I think ridicule is a good thing. So, like, for instance, you shouldn't give people the time of day. But that's the thing is it's a matter of how do you apply that. And I might even say maybe then it's good to get rid of that method altogether if people are just going to misapply it randomly to things that it shouldn't be applied to. So I guess what I mean by ridicule is, I mean more like if you're talking about a bigot, like someone that truly is like a neo-Nazi or something like that, I think the best thing that they deserve is to either be ignored or just kind of portrayed as like, this is silly.
I mean, so agreed. But my thing is, those words are now applied to everyone against you, right? Like, every congressperson as part of the GOP is a bigot now. And it's like, okay, is that really buying us anything? I was going to say, could 50% of the population be bigots? But then, history might agree with that. But
yeah,
to pull this kind of back to this sort of original thing is the news thing. What I want to get out of this conversation, even if we don't actually release something, is what do I say to someone who just says the news is fake? Even if there is good stuff, it's too hard to find. So I'm just going to ignore everything that's happening, but still have opinions. So like, maybe that's the problem. Is that what they're really doing? Or are they just saying, I'm going to ignore anything that's said that I disagree with because I can't trust anything? But then the stuff that does agree with what I'm saying, I am going to trust. Or am I just building up an argument for somebody that they're not making?
So you're saying someone that does throw up a hard wall in a conversation, how do you change the public perception? Because it seems like
my
that's
goal
kind of a
isn't to convince
right
the person. Like, it's like, I don't care if you don't want to talk about immigration policy or something. Fine, that doesn't bother me. It's this whole like, if you say I'm not even going to read anything anymore because it's like, what's the point? There's no news that's true or not fake anymore. So what do I even do? And it's like, I want to say, the New York Times non-opinion articles are like really good. Wall Street Journal, Vox is really good, but they're left-leaning, and the National Review is, they're pretty good, but they're pretty right-leaning. And so like, you can kind of build like a framework of things, but understanding that each one of these can do stupid things, and that's okay as long as you look at somebody else, and but it's like that sounds like the thing that I'm recommending is something that nobody wants to do.
Yeah.
The only answer I've ever been able to give is like Google News. Like if you don't too much try to customize Google News, like let it do local and all that stuff, but don't try to say like I only want to see articles from, Fox News or whatever. Then like that's usually pretty good because it'll show you articles and like, oh, that's interesting. You click on it, but you don't know who it's going to take you to. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, if you it bundles the topics together and you can click on the same topic by multiple newspapers. And I feel like that's a really good way to quickly kind of get like here's what one side thinks, here's what the other side thinks. Okay, at least I now understand these two different sides.
As far as like how does this sort of thing, how to address this? I mean, it's a good question. The problem that I have is anything that I'm going to potentially say is just I have a cynical outlook. So I don't really have much. I'm kind of part of that problem, I guess. Not in that I think everything's fake news or untrustworthy. Because like, for instance, full disclosure, I used to be sort of in the middle, apathetic towards politics and center right, but more lately I found myself being more still towards the middle and center left. But even I would say I'm not going to write something off from Fox News just because it's Fox News.
Right.
I think they do a lot of shoddy reporting, but I also think CNN and MSNBC occasionally has their moments where they just do something stupid. I mean, their organization's made up by people with biases, and so you're always going to have issues. But my problem is I'm kind of cynical towards it because with what I was kind of getting at earlier was like I feel like the only way you can really change that environment is to change how people interact with these things. But like, for instance, trying to practice more as an example of using steel manning type techniques, or even just at a more fundamental level in schooling, like logic and debate and things like that being kind of more implemented into curriculum. But the problem is like, even though I do think that's a legitimate solution, I don't see that happening because social media is too ingrained in us. The news cycle is too ingrained in us. Like, all of these things are so easy. I even find myself a lot of times when something comes out, that a story that kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth, I find myself trying to just Google the keywords to find something that opposes that thing. And I've tried to practice more of not doing that, but it's kind of instinctual now with how we've been raised in our media culture. I feel like the access of information at our fingertips has been both a blessing and a curse. And obviously, because there's so many things that we can look up now, when you're having a stupid debate with a friend, you could just Google it and prove them wrong, where you couldn't have in the past. But then that also obviously comes with, I don't know if we have intellectual frameworks ready and prepared to cipher all this information that's now at our fingertips, if that makes sense.
I mean, but I feel like the institutions kind of give you that, right? Like, okay, everybody knows that Fox News is really far right?
Yeah.
And everybody knows that MSNBC is really far left. So even if you want to take the most simple, basic way of doing this, because I think both of them are just terrible at like actual, journalism. They're like entertainment. Mm-hmm. But even if you want to just stay with that,
even then they have their outliers. But as a generalization,
you can almost guarantee yourself that both of those sides are going to like verbatim print their side's like major talking point on something.
Yeah.
Right. So like as an example, when like the Michael Brown shooting happened, 5 or 6 years ago around here, I remember every time a new event would happen, I would jump on both of those sites because I knew, like, if my feed was freaking out about something and I was like, is this really a big deal, or are they overblowing it or whatever, I could at least go over to the other side and like they are going to find a way to oppose it, even if it's silly. But now I have like a jumping off point to go, okay, maybe this, is a bigger deal than I thought, or not as big of a deal, or whatever. And I think there's way better institutions than those two, but those are the two that like I think everybody knows, right? But then, if you track that further, like you can find good quality journalism, I think, online that's still relatively big, that is really good at like explaining their viewpoints. And like I would recommend Vox for the left side and the National Review for the right side. I feel like both of those places are, they'll both make me mad sometimes by taking kind of a partisan side on issues, but
Right.
but they don't do it like ridiculously. They're well reasoned out, thought out journalism. And like Vox can get a little BuzzFeedy at times, and National Review can get a little, snowflake, stupid liberals a little bit at times. But like for the most part, if you can at least get through that screen of partisanship, they're like well thought out arguments. And then I can at least form like an opinion where I feel like I can talk to either side and at least like understand what they're thinking, even if I disagree.
That's a good point. You may actually be more into political stuff than I am, so that makes sense. Like the two websites that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think just pick two.
Yeah, I've kind of in different subject matters. For instance, I tend to like that. I like having that. I don't know if dichotomy is the right word on a subject. So, like for instance, just as far as like casual podcasts that I listen to both podcasts that are run by atheists and like podcasts that are run by religious people. And a lot of times those subjects come up, and to me it's interesting to get, and I feel like I have a more balanced approach personally on those types of subjects, while not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because of that. Like, because I'll hear an argument from one side, and then you kind of get the other person's argument, not sort of indirectly, like back and forth.
Because both sides are probably saying, the other side thinks this, and this is why they're dumb. But like they're not telling you the good arguments for the other side, and then you can jump over there and they do the same thing. But in that process of at least looking at two, you at least get somewhat of a framework of what the two decision points are and like the arguments for each side and why. Okay, like I agree with this side, but I at least understand where they're coming from. Like I feel like if you think the other side is completely moronic, that's whenever I feel like you're missing something, right?
Yeah, there can be moronic people espousing opinions within that side, but yeah, and
like if you legitimately think that like nobody could possibly support the current president, whether this is last year when it was Obama or this year when it's Trump, if you think the only way that somebody could possibly support this person is if they're, a racist bigot or a, socialist, crony, crazy person. Like, if that's what you think, then you're like completely missing a giant conversation. And like, I don't know how you could, well, see, here I am going saying, I don't know how you could do that. Well, okay, maybe I'm missing something now, right? But it's like, that's the thing that always frustrates me. And I hear this on both sides, usually against whoever the current president is. But I'll find myself thinking the same thing. And it's like, when I get in that mode, I'll like aggressively seek out the other side to like remind me that, there's really smart people that disagree with me who are way smarter than me. Why?
Right.
Are they, just evil monsters? Or do they actually have a reason to think that, even if I don't agree with it? And I don't know. I think that's like important to understand.
I think further, now that I'm thinking about this, further than just finding differing news sources, while that's definitely helpful, I think one of the things that's helpful is just knowing people personally.
Yeah.
That's kind of obvious, but like I'll just say I didn't vote for Trump in this last election. I mean, and he's not someone that I could see myself voting for. And I even have many conservative tendencies, and I also, as I said earlier, have very many liberal tendencies, and mainly I'm just apathetic towards the entire thing and cynical, which I realize is not a good thing. But leaving that aside, one of the things that has helped me as far as like understanding, well, how could someone vote for this person, is I come from a background, particularly where we're at in the Midwest, where there's just a lot of conservatives. A lot of my family members are conservatives, and even some of them reluctantly voted for him, which I still wouldn't have done, but I get it.
Right.
And I even have a range, like even just within my immediate family, like some of my family members reluctantly voted for him, and some of my family members excitedly voted for him. And I think mainly that's due to the fact that they don't have Twitter accounts, but
if you don't listen to what he says, you're good.
Yeah. So with that said, like when I see people saying things like oh, you might as well be a bigot and a racist and a misogynist, etc., because you voted for someone that is these things. Like, it's kind of hard for me to sign on, because it's like, yeah, but even though I agree, like, those things are horrible, and I don't like our president and certain things that he represents, I can't look at my family members and say, like, yeah, they sign on to that.
Right.
Like, it's more complicated than that.
They're not checking a box and saying, I agree 100% with what this person says. They're weighing out pros and cons, right?
Yes, which some people... and that's the thing, is we do that. Like, I think people do that in our lives. Like, there's things where there's a time to take principled stands on things where there's like there's no way I'm crossing XYZ line.
Right.
But then there's other times where we absolutely look at the practicality or what's the end game here. Like a lot of political theory and just things that we encounter in life in general are on the basis of a couple of bad things might happen in order to get this better outcome done.
For sure.
Now, there's some things where you shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't weigh things like from a utility perspective. But that's a whole different discussion. My point being just for how we weigh things are different, and for every person, there's a different line that we draw. And so I think it helps to know people that are actually of differing views.
Right.
And there definitely is a point to where we should draw a line. Like, obviously, if I had neo-Nazis in my family, I might draw the line there and be like, yeah, they're crazy. But and so there is a line. It's just a matter of it's a matter of being careful and balanced and not moving that line too far up.
Right.
Or too far out. I don't know what the proper phrasing would be there. But you get my point.
Yeah. And for everybody who thinks everybody who voted for Trump only did so because they're living in a Fox News bubble and they won't listen to outside opinions, and so they're just getting this one viewpoint. It's like, how many people do you know that voted for Trump that you haven't immediately like attacked?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
or take what I was just saying. Those same people that are so principled on those issues that they hold dear. There's a lot of people that I know that just voted for Trump on a single issue, and that was abortion. Now, leaving that particular issue aside as to like all the specifics
Sure.
of where people stand and all of that, the fact of the matter is I can understand that if there is someone who thinks that this is murder, I completely understand someone saying, this is my principled line. I'm going to vote for the person that promotes my agenda on this one issue.
Right.
Because I don't expect because there's some people that you shouldn't expect just follow the news all the time. They work, 60 hours a week, come home, deal with a family, and really the only thing that they're informed on may be this one particular issue that they find important enough to vote based on. And you can say that's good or bad voting, but it's neither here nor there. That's how people operate in our country.
and that's how the system
works.
forces them to, right?
And I want to be clear, like, I'm not necessarily saying that I'm not defending Trump in any stretch of the imagination. I think he's a horrible, immoral human being that's very petty. But aside from that, I understand people voting on a single issue or voting for a certain agenda. That's the thing is like, we need to allow some space. I'm not saying all the space, but there needs to be some space for us to just say, I disagree with your opinion. Even if you think someone's just being ignorant, okay. Well, then worst case scenario, they're ignorant.
Right.
Like like they're ignorant on an issue. There are plenty of issues I'm completely ignorant on and may vote for in favor of that I shouldn't have because I didn't know all the specifics of it. And that will and probably has happened before for myself.
Yeah.
And so there has to be some room for you to say, like, I just don't agree with that person without them being a monster.
Right. I guess I keep coming back to this. What do I tell that person? And is it just do it anyway?
I think there's not much that you can do. Like you said, your goal isn't to necessarily change their mind. I guess you mean on the topics, but I don't know if you can really change how people act except just by, I mean, this is going to sound like a cheesy slogan or something, and I really don't mean it that way, but I really do think the only way to change stuff is to just be the middle ground. Not necessarily that you, politically speaking, have to be center, but I really do think that's the only way stuff will change.
Let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
What could we do from a national level? You know, if you're king of the world, how do you fix the news problem? Whether it's the news is actually a problem, we need to fix the news, or people don't trust the news even though they should because maybe a certain administration is defaming it. But like, how do you deal with that at a national level? Not necessarily me and you.
Yeah.
Like, what can the news do different to not be ignored? Basically,
It's a tough question because again, like, this is where I become a little bit cynical, because I think the thing that you can do would be to point out, like, say a CNN host like Jake Tapper shares an article from CNN, which I follow him on Twitter, so he shares stuff all the time. One of the things that I always see pop up on there is people going like, oh yeah, fake news, CNN at it again, sharing this BS and stuff like that. And one of the things that I had hoped would maybe help alleviate that situation is to point out things like, well, what they've just printed is a retraction. Like, this is what honest newspapers do. So like, whenever you see someone post an editorial or a retraction, like, that's the sign that the process is working properly. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. But the problem is I think that's the best way you can do it, is to frame it in a positive statement, not say like, look, this is what you're supposed to do, but just explaining it like in a positive way, like, oh, well, this is how things work, though. This is actually a good sign of, like, things are working properly. But the problem is then what you typically see is silence.
well, so I would disagree with that. There wasn't silence, right? Like, Trump came out and said, see, this is, vindication that everything is fake and they're, an awful news organization. And then I didn't see what Fox News did, but I feel like this is the time when any news organization should jump on and go, hey, look at this. They made a mistake. They printed a retraction. They let people go, even though they were like high up people. And this is good, and this is good for everybody. And like, this is how we should be handling this. And then that should lend credibility to everything else. But instead, it seems like it always backfires because you have a person in a leadership position that's their like primary enemy right now, and maybe that's the fundamental issue. Because like there's always animosity between leaders and the press, but like this is crazy.
As far as combating, like, for instance, when the president says negative things, or the president's administration is constantly combating the news organizations, I think one thing that would actually work, and I don't want to completely put this on Fox News because it can go both ways in many different climates. But in this particular case, if you were to have conservative outlets have a more positive view towards other media outlets, that, like, when they print a retraction, and not do the dishonest thing and say, see, this is just another lie, when someone prints a retraction, which is what you're supposed to do. Like, they're literally taking something that's honest and turning it into a tally mark for a dishonesty scoreboard.
Right. Like, wouldn't it be in their best interest to promote the trustworthiness of the news in general? I guess not, though, if your goal is to say the news isn't trustworthy except for us because we're the ones that are.
Right, and that's the problem. I mean, but that's my only answer, is that would be the only, if you're talking about what would work, I think that's the only thing that would work. And it's not unprecedented, by the way, because there was a period of time during the Obama administration where I think the Obama administration was looking on ousting Fox News from the press briefings, and CNN actually stuck up for him. And there may have been other news outlets. I'm not sure. I'm not super versed in when that happened, but like they kind of stood up for him and said, no, we're not going to do that. Like Fox is part of the press corps. You know, they should be here. They're one of the main representatives of a news outlet that represents a lot of people, and so it does work, and it has happened before. So that's why I want to say, like, I didn't want to paint it as if like this is Fox's news problem, because
right. But right now, because of the side that they
because
are
of
on,
the climate,
right, yeah.
people think, well, you're just saying that because you're more liberal leaning, but it really is the case. Like I again, like I'm fine with some personalities on Fox News, and like particularly during the daytime, I'm sure a lot of the news is fine, because during the daytime where nobody's watching personalities per se, a lot of it's kind of business as usual. So
yes, maybe that's what the answer is just on no matter who it is, just ignore pundits. All right, let's end on a lighter note. You have in our show notes a little question that will probably spark a more heated debate than what we just had about, you know, the current American political climate.
Okay, so this is what happened. I was watching YouTube this week, and one of the ads that came on before the video I clicked on was a short trailer for the new Planet of the Apes movie. And in the trailer, because early reviews have started to come out, they had like a lot of blurbs from different outlets. One of the blurbs said something along the lines of, Andy Serkis deserves an Oscar. Andy Serkis is an actor that does a lot of the mocap stuff for movies. So, like, for instance, in Lord of the Rings, he was Gollum. I believe he was King Kong in the King Kong remake, not the newest one, but the one before that Peter Jackson did. He's also played the apes in the motion capture throughout most of the new Planet of the Apes movies, and he's the main character, Caesar, in the movies. And so I guess what people are insinuating is it's about time that someone who plays a motion capture character needs to be recognized for what he's doing, and he deserves an acting award just like everybody else does. Even, I guess, if there was a special award for motion capture that they're asking to be created. I've heard this said by a lot of people before. I've even said the same thing in the past. Now, I'm going to get your opinion on this because I think you would have a better informed one than me, but I'm kind of two minds of this. So, on the one hand, I feel like, yeah, he should, like, he's doing a lot of hard work. Like, I remember watching some of the extras for Lord of the Rings when he was doing the motion capture for Gollum, and I remember him, like, in a green skin-tight suit, floundering around in a lake trying to catch a CGI fish that would eventually be added in. And I just remember thinking, like, the coordination that you have to do something that embarrassingly stupid and playing that character, even down to the facial expressions which are captured, you're still acting in a role even though you're a CGI character. And so I've always kind of thought, yeah, that would be cool to see him get something like that. But then the other side of me sort of thinks he's not the one doing all of the hard work. He is doing a bit of acting ability, and he is undeniably talented, but it's the CGI people that are actually putting everything together. They're the ones that are doing a lot of the hard work and actually displaying it on screen. They're the ones that are kind of doing the feat. But then there's still this other small part of me that says, well, so what? They absolutely are, but why can't, now that CGI characters are becoming more prominent things in movies and even becoming the memorable parts of movies, whether it's something in Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or the new Planet of the Apes movie, why can't those people be recognized for a good job that they are doing? So that's kind of my feelings on it. Shoot, what do you think?
Okay, so first, little history. This is actually an old argument in the, what was it, the 80s, whenever Empire Strikes Back came out. A lot of people thought that Frank Oz should get an Oscar for Yoda. And he did a bunch of, different characters throughout his career that was, he's probably the most famous, Muppeteer? I don't know what they call them, other than Jim Henson.
Yeah.
But, like, he did a whole bunch of stuff, right? And he was kind of in that same boat. But first, either one of these people, if that was played by a person, right, assuming it was just actually a person, would those get Oscars? Like, they're not the type of roles or, like, movies that would be in that category, right? Like, Robert Downey Jr. hasn't gotten an Oscar for Iron Man.
Well, I don't think though that I could be wrong, but I don't think people are insinuating that they should be nominated for like the best actor award running against Leonardo DiCaprio and other people. I think what they're saying is this is a new technology that's unprecedented, and I think if that's the angle people are taking, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I guess I don't think of it as unprecedented. To me, it's like it's a special effect, and he's part of a special effect team, and they do give out visual effects. Actually, I think they give out a separate special effects award too. Maybe not. I don't remember, but like they give out awards for teams that do visual effects, and like to me, he's part of that team, and arguably not even the most important part, right? Like, I think he's really big in motion capture because he's really big in motion capture, and he's been doing it a while. He knows how things are done, and he's easy to market in that position. But like, I don't know. It's like to me, Frank Oz has a better argument for getting one than him, because at least he was doing the voice and he had his hand, doing all the actions and all of that. But even then, like his eyes and ears and all that were controlled by other people. Like it's a practical effect done by a team of people, and I think everything that Andy Serkis has done is in that same category. It's like he helped tremendously for it, but that doesn't mean he did everything or even the heavy lifting. So
well, you don't think though that there's a little bit more that goes into acting out a CGI character than there is voicing a puppet or just moving it kind of around a little bit? Like, I feel like...
Correct. Because when you're doing a puppet, you're controlling the whole bit, right? Acting out something, like, yes, you're providing a whole lot of helpful data, but you're not doing the whole thing. Because, like, should an animator get an award for a specific animation on a specific, should the person who did like Woody in the original Toy Story, did they get like an actor award, or does Tom Hanks get the actor award? Or like, it's a weird.
Well, it's
so much of a team effort. I don't know how, like, just because he's the figurehead, because you can see a picture of him standing there, but like there's a huge team of people like doing an amazing amount of stuff for way longer than he is.
Like, but I can see that there could be an argument made for there being room for an extra award in addition to the special effects award that would obviously be given to the team, because when you're talking about live action movies, it's a little different than saying, well, in Toy Story we had this guy on stilts and he was kind of moving around for the character.
I don't know. I think it's the same thing. They do motion capture.
Okay, well then maybe that still applies, like, because
but
I guess you're right.
It?
Like, if you think of a movie like what was that, Christmas Carol, that was made with Jim Carrey and all that, I don't think that's quite there yet, but I can reasonably see, like, if that technology becomes more affordable, which maybe it is already, and I'm just unaware, and people want to make movies that are more like that, and they kind of they walk over that uncanny valley, and they can start making things more lifelike just through computer animation. If someone is actually acting out those things with motion capture, I can see an argument being made for there's more, you can draw out a particular performance, because it is starting to become where these CGI characters are starting to become what makes movies now. It's not quite there yet, but I think it's getting there more and more as technology becomes easier to do these sorts of things. And if someone's acts, like, for instance, you're seeing Andy Serkis's face. It's not like, oh, the team are doing all of those things.
But they
are. Is Andy Serkis
it's not.
Acting out.
They use that as a frame of reference, right? But that's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not his face. They do so much more on top of that.
Well, let me ask you this: do you think that someone should get an Academy Award for acting, like back in the days of practical effects, if they were in costume?
I mean, yeah,
like,
if they're doing it.
For instance, no one got an Academy Award for the old Planet of the Apes movies, but in the old Planet of the Apes movies, Rodney McDowall, I think it was, like, played in every single movie and was always in a mask. Like,
yeah, so it'd be different if he was, like, I think if you're in a mask, it's you, right? You have makeup on. But if you're in Jabba the Hutt with 3 other people, then no. Does that make sense? Is it a team of
Yeah.
people controlling everything, a bunch of stuff separately, or is it one person doing it?
What about hybrid characters? Like, let's say Dr. Octavius from Spider-Man 2 was up for an award.
I think that's fine because he was in it plenty when he wasn't like digital at all, but having
Yeah.
digital appendages or whatever is fine. Like for example, and this one maybe is the most crossing the line I can think of is if Brad Pitt and Benjamin Button, when there was times when he was completely digital, right? But he still like created the character and acted out most of it himself, and he was
Yeah.
digitally touched up and everything. But that's different than an ape where like a giant team of people created a whole new system, and then they like use data from somebody's acting to jumpstart their animation. But they animated all that still. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's not
but
like this
correct
one to
me if I'm
one.
wrong. It's still everything. Like for instance, it's like a recording of something that someone has done, and then whenever they make this, when they make this digital creation of the ape in the case of like the Planet of the Apes, then they just sort of put that on top of what he has done.
No, it's
So
more
it's,
like
it's like
they-
if you put hair on a recording.
it's more like whenever they made the Jungle Book and they recorded people doing things like on film, and then they traced over that, right? They still drew everything out themselves, but they like used those frames from that video of the person doing the action to like kind of get the body movement down. And now that obviously it's higher resolution, they can do
I
faces
think-
and all that, but like they use that as a jumping start point, and then they do all sorts of stuff on top of that.
But what I think people are saying is it's not necessarily an award because Andy Serkis made the CGI so cool, because he didn't have anything to do with it. It's an award for recognizing a CGI character because of the acting that the actor did, because normally those CGI, and not even CGI, but traditionally costumed characters are bypassed over. Their acting job is not even considered for an award because of the effect, whether that's digital or like practical back in the day.
But it's
in the case of Star
I think it's just that
Wars.
it's too abstracted away from the person. You can judge a person's acting whenever they're being filmed directly, but once you have
Yeah.
that many layers, like I'd be totally on board with having an award that was like digital character, right? Like best digital character. It could be Aslan, where there was no mocap going on, but a team of people, including Liam Neeson, created this character that was really, really good. Or it could be, Gollum, and Andy Serkis is a major part of that team, as is the technical director and the comp artist and all that stuff. Like I don't know, it's so much of a team effort that I just can't say like it's an acting award, because it's so far. It's not just like, yeah, we record you doing the thing and then like we digitally put a costume on you. That's not what it is at all. It's like you did a thing and we use that, and then we like change everything. We move your eyebrows around. We make you blink when you weren't blinking. They do all sorts of stuff on top of that. It's not that simple, I guess. Now you said earlier, you read that a lot about him. The thing is, he's the one that brings that up all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think I have a generally negative view towards the idea of it, mainly because he makes me mad. Because he's like, there's a lot of times where he's said things like, yeah, I'm just acting, and it's not like I'm a CG character. They're just putting a CG costume on me. That's it. And it's like, holy cow, man. Like, you spent, 3 weeks in some place, dressed up funny and doing things, and that's great. But there's people that spent like a year or two inventing new technology to like build the thing that you helped them with. But you're part of a team. And it's not that you shouldn't be commended for that, but like you can't ignore everything else that goes into that.
No, I agree. Like, I think part of this may be getting hung up on a particular person that is he always comes across sort of arrogant. But I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of, for instance, Leonardo DiCaprio finally won an award, and he won it for The Revenant. I feel like part of the reason that he was in consideration, mainly due to the fact that he hadn't gotten one for so many years and people said he deserved one, was also just because in The Revenant, like he did all this crazy physical stuff and like actually hurt himself and got dirt in his eye and
Right, but that's not. I
all
don't
of
think
this.
that's supposed to be part of it, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, but that was also part of the debate too, because I remember on the radio, which, granted, they could have been completely wrong as to what the reasoning was, but they were having a discussion that if that were the case, like, should you really get an award for just doing hard stuff? Like, because I can go film myself doing something stupid and hard right now, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I deserve an award for it just because it made it on camera. And but I do think though that's how they're looking at it though. The same with Andy Serkis. Like I said, going back to that example from Lord of the Rings with him, moving around in the creek or whatever, trying to catch a fish. Like that was definitely something that you had to be talented in order to do something like that. Even though there was the motion capture stuff applied and there were effects involved as well.
Yeah, there's nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
what he does is really like impressive, and it takes a lot of talent and everything. But so does the guy who's chasing him down the hill with a reflector, right?
So for you, it just comes down to it needs to be a team thing. If it is an award for that specific highlighting, it needs to be a team
Right.
effort.
I feel like it's a separate award, and it specifically should be related to the team that made the character, because I don't know. There's so much of a variance in how those all happen that I don't think. Well, honestly, I don't think there's really enough examples to really do that. I don't know. It feels like it's more like a VFX show, not an Oscar type award. But
Yeah.
my thing with the Oscars is it's the whole point of the award is it's like an award given to you by your peers, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not supposed to be this is the best movie that came out. It's supposed to be this is the movie that the people in the industry want to commend the most.
Yeah.
So Leonardo DiCaprio getting an award because he worked really hard, it makes perfect sense because everybody in the industry is like, hey, that guy worked really hard. And we want to say like, hey, kudos to you, man. Good job.
Yeah.
And whether, that's why like an artsy movie might win over a more popular movie. It doesn't mean the artsy movie's better. It just means that the people in the industry want to like prop that up and go, hey, we like the way that was done. We want you to know that. And we want to like kind of push that type of stuff forward and make that more well known. And I don't know. I think that's the Oscars are good at that. And that's one of the weird things about the Grammys, because isn't the Grammys like it's usually album of the year is also like the one that sold the most, which always seemed weird. Like, what's the point?
I don't think that's necessarily the case.
I don't
think
really know.
I think with the Grammys, I think it's just something that they kind of take into consideration because there's so many albums that for technical reasons you could say this album's amazing. But I think they do kind of, they're not going to pull some indie band that's amazing at guitar and writing music that only 5 people listen to. Obviously, there has to be some level of notoriety before they're going to nominate them.
It just seems like
I
it's
think
way more
that
often that
one's-
like a small budget movie will win Best Picture or be in consideration or whatever. Whereas it seems like the
think
other
it's
way, it's like it's always
easier-
Beyonce and Taylor Swift and Kanye West or something. I don't know.
I think it's easier to do it in the movie industry because you can actually do it based upon the amount of releases a movie has had. Whereas the music industry, it's so like you
Does it have to like get a
can,
Billboard chart or something?
Yeah. You can be an individual artist that just like started stuff on YouTube, or you just started an artist page on Facebook, and so the music industry is more. I don't know. I don't know much about either industry, so I could just be completely wrong. But I feel like that's kind of the difference.
So, to wrap this up, I think to answer your question, does Andy Serkis deserve an Oscar? I think yes, him and the team that built the characters that he did probably do deserve an Oscar. Does that seem reasonable?
I think I could probably sign on to that.
All right, let's rubber stamp that, and that'll be in the 2019, 2018 Oscars.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank us, everybody. Okay, so we've been going for quite a while, so let's go ahead and wrap this up and let people know how to get a hold of us or talk to us or whatever. Does that sound good?
And how can they find out about the work that we do?
All the important work that we do. All right, well, we have a website, atownfm.com. Hopefully that will work.
Awesome.
And then you set up a Facebook page, right?
Yeah, I set up a page on Facebook. So if anybody searches at A-Town FM, you can find our page. We'll be updating everybody on what we're doing frequently from that page, and we'll interact with a lot of people there.
And that's kind of our primary way of communicating with everybody, right? As far as comments and everything, best place to leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Critical feedback.
Right. I mean, they could also, if they wanted to, we would love reviews on iTunes.
Right, but only if they're good. If they're bad, go ahead and go to Facebook.
Yeah, go ahead and go to Facebook so that we can then monitor and delete your comments.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
No, we won't do that, but we'll take constructive criticism, maybe, depending on who it's from. And then also, we do have a Twitter account as well, at A-Town-FM. And if anybody wants to tweet us there, send us your tweets. We'd be happy to interact.
We should mention, too, that it's A-Town. All of these different things, it's A-Town with no dash in between the A and the T.
Right.
Hopefully that's how it works in iTunes. We haven't actually submitted to them yet since we haven't, finished this episode. So
right.
We'll see if we're giving you horrible advice there. So if you don't see it with just A-Town FM, you might need to search A-Town in iTunes, but hopefully not.
Except, of course, by now, this A-Town FM no dash is probably a household name. So
that's a good point. We're all on all the top charts and everything by now already. So, yeah, I don't even know why we need it. We're probably just going to cut all this.
Right.
All right, let's let everybody go.